I installed a hidden camera to catch my rich wife with her boss, but what I witnessed when I'm at work was shattering. I never thought I'd become the kind of man who hides cameras in his own home. That's not who I am, or at least, that's not who I thought I was before everything started unraveling. Before the late night texts, before the sudden business trips, before my wife, my beautiful, successful, impossibly wealthy wife, started looking at me like I was a stranger she'd accidentally married in some fever dream she couldn't quite remember. My name is Daniel Cross, and for 3 years I lived what everyone else thought was a fairy tale. I met Sophia at a fundraising gala. I had no business attending. I was there as a plus one, dragged along by my college roommate who worked in finance and needed a wingman. I was a high school history teacher making $42,000 a year, wearing a borrowed tuxedo that didn't quite fit, nursing a whiskey sour I couldn't really afford, and trying not to look as out of place as I felt. Then she walked up to me, Sophia Whitmore, though I didn't know her name yet, in a dress that probably cost more than my car, with eyes like smoke and steel, and a smile that made me forget I was supposed to be intimidated. "You look miserable," she said, and it wasn't a question. "That obvious?" I replied. "Refreshingly so. Everyone else here is pretending to have the time of their lives while mentally calculating tax write-offs." We talked for 3 hours about history, about the difference between legacy and inheritance, about whether people could ever really escape the lives they were born into. And she told me she ran her family's real estate development company. I told her I taught teenagers about the French Revolution and occasionally broke up fights in the cafeteria. She laughed, really laughed, and said, "That sounds harder than what I do." 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married in a ceremony that her family paid for, in a venue I couldn't pronounce, surrounded by people who looked at me like I was the help. But Sophia never made me feel small. Not then. She'd come home from 12-hour days negotiating million-dollar contracts, kick off her Louboutins in the foyer of our brownstone, her brownstone technically, though she always said ours, and ask me about my day like it mattered. Like the fact that I got Jeremy Patterson to finally understand the Marshall Plan was as important as her closing a deal on a mixed-use development in Brooklyn. "You shape minds," she told me once, her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my skin. "I just move money around. You're building the future. I'm just maintaining the present." I loved her for that, for seeing me, for making me feel like I wasn't just the poor boy who got lucky. But somewhere in year 3, things shifted. It was subtle at first. The way she'd angle her phone away when a text came in, the way she started showering as soon as she got home, when she used to collapse on the couch and demand I make her laugh before she could face anything else. The way she started mentioning her Marcus Chen, more and more in passing conversation. Marcus thinks we should pivot to sustainable materials. Marcus wants to expand into the Seattle market. Marcus and I are going to that conference in Miami. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, that I was letting my working class background convince me I wasn't good enough, that she'd eventually realize she could do better. My therapist. Yes, I had a therapist. Sophia insisted I get one when I started having panic attacks about being a kept man, told me these were intrusive thoughts, not facts. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday in October, and I remember because Thursdays I had late grading, and I didn't get home until almost 9. Sophia was supposed to be in Boston for a site visit, staying overnight back Friday afternoon. Except when I walked into our bedroom to change, I heard water running in the ensuite. My first thought was that we'd been robbed. My second thought, the one that made my stomach drop, was that she'd come home early. I opened the bathroom door, and there she was, standing under the rainfall shower, mascara streaking down her face, shoulders shaking with sobs she was trying to muffle with her hand. "Sophia?" She spun around, and for just a second, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Raw, animal fear. Like I'd caught her in the middle of something unforgivable. Then she composed herself, that quick, impressive way she had of rebuilding her armor in real time. "You're home early," she said, her voice steady even though her face betrayed her. "You're supposed to be in Boston. Change of plans. Flight got delayed, so I just drove back. Didn't want to spend the night in a hotel alone." She was lying. I knew she was lying. Sophia didn't cry over flight delays. Sophia didn't cry over anything, at least not where anyone could see. "What's wrong?" I asked, moving toward her, but she held up a hand. "I'm fine, just A hard day. Give me 10 minutes? I left. What else could I do? But standing in our bedroom, listening to her cry behind a closed door, I felt something calcify in my chest. A terrible certainty I couldn't name yet, but could feel taking root. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more. She'd leave for work at 6:30 instead of 7. Come home at 8 instead of 6. Weekend trips became more frequent. Chicago, Austin, Charlotte, always with vague explanations about properties or investors or opportunities that couldn't wait. And always, Marcus was there. I looked him up, of course. 38, Harvard MBA, formerly worked for Blackstone before Sophia recruited him to Whitmore Development 3 years ago, right around when we got married. In his LinkedIn photo, he was handsome in that polished, expensive way. Sharp jaw, perfect teeth, the kind of confidence that came from never having to check a price tag. I hated him on sight, but I hated myself more for hating him, for being that guy, the insecure husband, the one who couldn't handle that his wife was successful and beautiful and worked closely with other men, the one who saw shadows where there was probably just work, except for the phone calls she'd take in the other room, except for the new lingerie I found in her drawer, tag still on, never worn for me, except for the way she flinched when I touched her like my hands were somehow wrong now, except for the Thursday I came home early with the flu and heard her in her home office, her voice low and urgent. I know, but we can't, not yet, he doesn't. And then she saw me in the doorway and ended the call so fast I heard that her phone hit the desk. Daniel, I didn't hear you come in. Who were you talking to? Marcus? About the Riverside project. At 7 p.m. on your personal phone? Her jaw tightened. Is there a problem? I don't know, Sophia. Is there? We stared at each other across a divide that felt suddenly massive, and I saw it happen in real time. The decision she made not to tell me the truth. I have work to do, she said, turning back to her computer. There's leftover Thai in the fridge. That was the night I started planning. If you've ever suspected someone you love of betraying you, you know the specific kind of hell it creates. It's not just the doubt. It's the way doubt colonizes every good memory, recoloring it with suspicion. Every kiss becomes a lie you were too stupid to see through. Every I love you becomes a line she was rehearsing. Every moment of intimacy becomes evidence of your own gullibility. I tried to shake it. God, I tried. I threw myself into lesson planning, volunteered to sponsor the debate team, started going to the gym at 5 a.m., running on the treadmill until my legs burned and my thoughts finally, mercifully, went quiet. But then I'd come home, and she'd be there but not there. Physically present, mentally 1,000 miles away. We'd have dinner in silence, her eyes on her phone, my eyes on her, searching for the woman I'd married and finding only this stranger who wore her face. Our sex life, which had always been good, frequent, the kind of connected intimacy that made me feel chosen, became sporadic, then rare, then non-existent. I'm just tired, she'd say when I reached for her in bed. Maybe this weekend, she'd promise, then book a last-minute trip to Philadelphia. It's not you, she'd insist, but her body language screamed otherwise. 3 months of this. 3 months of watching the woman I loved slip away while I convinced myself I was being crazy, controlling, paranoid. Until the morning I found the receipt. It was sticking out of her laptop bag. She'd left it on the kitchen counter while she showered. A hotel receipt. The Peninsula, Beverly Hills. 2 nights, 3 weeks ago. A trip I didn't know she'd taken. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Presidential suite. $4,000 a night. Sophia came from money, so the cost didn't shock me. What shocked me was the date. She'd told me she was in San Francisco for a zoning hearing. I remembered because I'd called her that Thursday night and she'd sounded distracted. Traffic noises in the background. Said she was walking back to her hotel after dinner with the city attorney. But she hadn't been in San Francisco. She'd been in Los Angeles. And the reservation was for 2 guests. I stood in that kitchen in the home her family's money had bought, wearing the expensive coffee maker she'd insisted we needed, surrounded by marble countertops and designer appliances, and felt myself fragment. Half of me wanted to confront her, to walk into the bathroom and demand the truth, consequences be damned. The other half, the half that won, wanted proof, needed proof. Because if I was wrong, I'd destroy us with my suspicion. And if I was right, I needed to see it, needed to know. Needed evidence that this wasn't just my working class insecurity talking. That's how I ended up in a spy shop in Queens on a Tuesday afternoon, using my teacher's salary to buy a device I'd never imagined I'd need. The guy behind the counter was exactly what you'd picture. Late 50s, ponytail, Grateful Dead t-shirt, the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen some things and stopped being surprised by human nature decades ago. First timer? He asked when I walked in, and I must have looked as lost as I felt. That obvious? You got that deer in headlights thing going. Don't worry, 80% of my customers have the same look. You want audio, video, or both? Both, but discreet. It needs to be small, hidden. He nodded, no judgment, and pulled out a box about the size of a deck of cards. This is what you want. Wi-Fi enabled. Live stream to your phone or record to cloud storage. Looks like a phone charger. Plugs right into the wall. Motion activated or continuous recording, your choice. Battery backup in case of power outage. Night vision. 4-month return window. No questions asked. How much? $350. I thought about my checking account. Thought about the fact that Sophia paid for almost everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the vacations. Even my car insurance after I wrapped my Honda around a pole during a snowstorm, and she insisted on buying me a safer vehicle. Thought about the fact that using my own meager salary to spy on my wealthy wife felt like the saddest fucking metaphor for our marriage. I'll take it. He rang me up, then stopped before handing me the bag. Listen, man, word of advice? Whatever you find or don't find on that thing, you gotta be prepared for it. Most people think they want to know the truth, but truth is like a hand grenade. Once you pull the pin, you can't put it back. I took the bag. I'm already holding the grenade, I just need to see what I'm pointing it at. Planting the camera felt like crossing a line and I couldn't uncross. I chose a Friday. Sophia had a morning meeting downtown, then a lunch with potential investors. Then, according to her calendar, which she kept synced to the tablet in the kitchen, the rest of the afternoon blocked off for admin work from home. Admin work. That's what she'd been calling these mysterious afternoons when she'd be home, but locked in her office, or in the bedroom with the door closed, or taking calls in the garden with her voice too low for me to hear. I called in sick to school, faked a cough on the phone with the substitute coordinator, felt like a criminal in my own home as I unpacked the device and read the instructions. The bedroom seemed too obvious. The home office felt too invasive. There were legitimate confidential business files in there. I wasn't trying to steal trade secrets. I settled on the living room. It was where she spent the most time when she was home, but not working. Where she'd take those hushed phone calls, pacing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the brownstone's private courtyard. Where I'd heard her voice crack with emotion she wouldn't share with me. There was an outlet behind the fiddle-leaf fig plant in the corner. Decorative, expensive, a gift from her mother. I plugged the camera charger in, adjusted the angle so it captured the couch, the windows, the entrance to the hallway, downloaded the app, tested it. On my phone screen, I could see our living room in perfect clarity. Could see myself standing there like an idiot staring at a device that would either save my marriage or destroy it. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Lunch running long. Be home by 3. Need anything? 3 hours. I had 3 hours before she'd be back. I texted it back. I'm good, love you. She sent back a heart emoji, not love you too, just a heart. When had that changed? I left the apartment, drove aimlessly through Brooklyn, ended up at Prospect Park and walked until my feet hurt. Tried to convince myself to go back and dismantle the whole thing. That this was wrong, that trust once broken like this couldn't be repaired, but I didn't go back. I sat on a bench near the lake and watched people live their normal lives, joggers, dog walkers, parents with strollers, couples holding hands, and wondered when my life had become so untethered from normalcy. My phone buzzed. The app, motion detected. My heart seized. I opened the live stream. Sophia walked into frame, home earlier than expected, her work bag slung over her shoulder. She was on the phone, her free hand gesturing as she talked. I couldn't hear what she was saying. I'd muted notifications so I wouldn't accidentally broadcast her conversations in public. But I could see her face, see the animation there, the way she smiled. When had she stopped smiling like that with me? She ended the call, tossed her phone on the couch, and disappeared into the kitchen. Returned with a glass of wine. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. She stood by the windows, drinking, staring out at nothing. And even through the camera's lens, I could see the weight she was carrying. Her shoulders curved inward. Her hand shook slightly as she raised the glass to her lips. Then she pulled out her phone again, typed something, stared at the screen, waiting. A response came. She read it, closed her eyes, and started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears from that night in the shower. These were gut-wrenching, shoulder-shaking sobs that looked like they were being ripped out of her against her will. I stood up from the park bench so fast I startled the nearby pigeon. My first instinct was to run home, to burst through the door and demand to know what was hurting her. My second instinct, darker, more corrosive, was to wait, to watch, to see what happened next. I hated myself for choosing the second option, but I stayed in the park, watching my wife fall apart on my phone screen, and felt something inside me fall apart too. For 2 weeks I watched. I became intimately familiar with the rhythms of Sophia's secret life, the life she lived in our home when she thought she was alone. I learned that she cried almost every day, usually in the late afternoon, after work. Calls ended and before I came home. Sometimes she'd pour wine and sit on the couch, staring at nothing. Sometimes she'd pace. Sometimes she'd curl into a ball on the floor, her phone clutched to her chest, and rock herself like a child. I learned that she took calls from Marcus every day, sometimes multiple times. The conversations ranged from 5 minutes to over an hour. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could see her reactions. The way she'd cover her mouth with her hand, the way she'd nod vigorously as if convincing herself of something, the way she'd sometimes throw her phone across the room when the call ended, then immediately retrieve it, checking to make sure it still worked. I learned that she was hiding something big, not just from me, from everyone. There were other calls and other conversations. With lawyers, I assumed, based on the way she'd have legal pads out, taking notes with furious intensity. With doctors, maybe, based on fragments I could lip read. Results came back, and how much time, and once, devastatingly, can't tell him yet. That one nearly broke me. I was in the teacher's lounge, pretending to grade essays, watching my wife receive what looked like catastrophic news, and I couldn't do anything but watch her receive it alone. Was she sick? Dying? Was that what this was? Not an affair, but a terminal diagnosis she couldn't bring herself to share? But that didn't explain the hotel in LA. Didn't explain the late nights with Marcus. Didn't explain the new lingerie, or the way she'd flinched away from my touch. I learned that she was planning something. There were meetings I didn't know about. People coming to the apartment while I was at work. Lawyers in expensive suits. A private investigator, I think, based on the way they spread photos across the coffee table that she studied with intensity. An older couple, well-dressed, who she spoke with for 2 hours while all 3 of them cried. I should have stopped watching, should have confronted her. But by then, I was in too deep. The camera had become my addiction, my terrible secret, the thing I checked compulsively between classes during lunch, the moment I got home before she knew I was back. I told myself I needed the full picture, needed to understand before I acted. The truth was, I was terrified of what I'd find if I looked any closer. 3 weeks into my surveillance, things escalated. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Tuesdays I had a free period last slot, which meant I could leave early without anyone noticing. I was in my car, about to drive home, when the motion alert came through. Sophia wasn't supposed to be home. She'd told me that morning she had back-to-back meetings until 7 that I should eat without her. But there she was on my screen, walking into the living room with Marcus Chen right behind her. My entire body went cold. This was it. This was the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure, the proof that my worst fears were justified. I turned up the volume, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Can't keep doing this," Sophia was saying, and she sounded destroyed, absolutely destroyed. Marcus reached for her, and I fucking watched, as he pulled her into a hug. But it wasn't sexual, it wasn't romantic. It was the kind of hug you give someone who's drowning, desperate and necessary and anchoring. "We knew it would be hard," Marcus said, his voice clearer now, "but you're doing the right thing." "Am I?" Sophia pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Because it feels like I'm destroying everything. He looks at me like he knows, like he can see right through me, and I can't keep lying to him, Marcus. I can't. You're not lying. You're protecting him. That's just lying with better peanut, Marcus laughed, despite himself. When this is over, when this is over, there might not be anything left to save. They moved to the couch, and I watched as Marcus pulled out a folder. They spent the next 40 minutes going through documents I couldn't quite see, Sophia taking notes, asking questions I couldn't fully hear, both of them looking progressively more grim. Then Marcus said something that made my blood stop moving. Have you told Daniel about his father yet? Sophia's head snapped up. No, and I'm not going to. Not until this is finished. He's already suspicious. If I drop that bomb now, he'll either think I'm manipulating him, or he'll want to get involved, and we can't risk that. Sophia, he has a right to know. He has a right to know when I can give him the full picture. Not bits and pieces that will just hurt him more. My father. My father had been dead for 6 years, died of a heart attack when I was finishing grad school, left behind debts and a storage unit full of broken dreams. What could Sophia possibly know about him that I didn't? I sat in that car for 2 hours, watching them work, watching my wife shoulder a burden I didn't understand, and felt the foundations of my reality crumble. This wasn't an affair. This was something else entirely. Something bigger. Something that involved me in ways I hadn't imagined. When Marcus finally left, Sophia sat alone on the couch for a long time, her face in her hands. And I realized with dawning horror that I'd been so focused on catching her betraying me that I'd completely missed the fact that she was fighting a battle I knew nothing about, and she was fighting it alone because she was trying to protect me. I started the car, drove home, walked into the apartment like nothing was wrong. Sophia was in the kitchen, pulling together a late dinner, and she looked up when I came in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Hey, how was your day? Fine, yours? Long, but good. We were so good at lying to each other now. So practiced at this performance of normalcy. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake the truth out of her. Wanted to tell her I knew, not about the affair that wasn't happening, but about the secret that was happening. Wanted to demand she trust me enough to let me help her carry whatever weight was breaking her. But I couldn't. Not without admitting to the camera. Not without confessing that I'd been spying on her for weeks. So instead, I kissed her forehead and said, let me help with dinner. And we cooked together in silence. Two people who loved each other desperately. Separated by secrets neither of us knew how to breach, and I became a detective of my own life. If Sophia was hiding something about my father, there had to be traces. Evidence I'd missed. So I started digging into a past I thought I'd already understood. My father, Richard Cross, had been a contractor. Hardworking, blue-collar, the kind of man who believed in honest labor and American dreams that never quite panned out. He'd built houses for wealthy families in Connecticut, including the Whitmores. That's actually how I'd known about Sophia before I met her. Dad had mentioned the family a few times, usually with a mix of respect and resentment. Old money, those Whitmores, he'd said once. The kind of people who think the world works different for them, and they're right, it does. He died suddenly. Too suddenly, I'd thought at the time. 52 years old, in decent shape, no warning. Just collapsed on a job site and was gone before the ambulance arrived. The official cause was a massive coronary event. The unofficial cause, at least according to his friends who spoke at his funeral, was stress. He'd been worried about something in the months before he died. Distracted. Drinking more than usual. I'd been 24, drowning in student loans in graduate school, too self-absorbed to notice my father falling apart. Now, I pulled out the boxes of his things I'd stored in our Sophia's basement. Boxes I hadn't opened since the funeral. Sorting through his life, looking for clues to a mystery I hadn't known existed. Most of it was mundane. Tax returns, work invoices, photos of me at various awkward ages. A birthday card from my mother, they'd been divorced since I was 10, with a passive-aggressive note about child support. Then I found the notebooks. My father had kept work journals. Not detailed, he wasn't a prose guy. But he'd noted jobs, dates, problems encountered, solutions implemented. I flipped through them, looking for mentions of the Whitmores. There were dozens, spanning years. He'd done extensive work for the family, renovations on their Connecticut estate, a pool house, a guest cottage, multiple smaller projects. Then, 6 months before his death, the tone changed. Deputy, meeting with R. Whitmore. Discrepancy. He says it's a misunderstanding. Numbers don't lie. Sep 28. Called lawyer. Can't afford to pursue. But it's not right. It's not right. Octi 3. Whitmore Jr. called, said to drop it, implied consequences. What am I supposed to do? An oxyapamnishal. Can't sleep, can't eat. This is bigger than I thought. If I'm right, it's not just me. It's dozens of guys. Oxys 30. Decided. I have to come forward, even if it costs me everything. The journal ended there. 2 weeks later, he was dead. I sat on the basement floor, surrounded by my father's archives, and felt the world tilt. Sophia's family had done something to my father, something that had killed him, if not directly, then through the stress of fighting them. And Sophia knew about it. That's what she and Marcus were working on. That's what the lawyers and the private investigator and the secret meetings were about. She was trying to fix it, trying to make right whatever her family had done wrong. And she was doing it behind my back because she knew, she had to know, that if I learned the truth, I'd never forgive her family, that I'd see her differently, that it would destroy us. My hands were shaking. I felt hot and cold at once, nauseous and electrified. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. Sophia was home, curled on the couch with her laptop, video calling someone. I turned up the volume. Statute of limitations expires in 4 months, a voice was saying. Older, male lawyer cadence. After that, any civil claims become much harder to pursue. So we need the evidence before then, Sophia said. Ideally, yes, but Ms. Whitmore, I have to advise you again. What you're doing, exposing your own family's fraud, it's going to have significant personal consequences. Your father will fight this. Your brother already is fighting this. You could be looking at, I don't care, Sophia cut him off, and her voice was steel. My father-in-law is dead because my family defrauded him and dozens of other contractors. My husband doesn't know his father died fighting for justice. If I have to burn my family's reputation to the ground to make this right, then that's what I'm going to do. The lawyer sighed. And your husband? When are you planning to tell him? When I have something concrete to give him. Not suspicions, not theories, facts, justice. His father's name cleared. Restitution for the families who were hurt. I'm not going to tell Daniel his father was killed by my family's greed until I can also tell him I've fixed it. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. He suspected me of having an affair for months now. I can see it in his face, the way he looks at me, like he's waiting for confirmation that I'm betraying him. Her voice cracked. And I am betraying him, just not the way he thinks. I'm lying to him every day to protect him from a truth that will devastate him. What kind of wife does that make me? The kind who loves him enough to carry the weight herself. Sophia laughed bitterly. Or the kind who's too much of a coward to trust him with the truth. I stopped the recording. Couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't breathe. My wife, my beautiful, wealthy, powerful wife, had spent the last 6 months secretly investigating her own family, trying to uncover evidence of the fraud that had killed my father, all while I'd been suspecting her of cheating. I'd planted a camera in our home to catch her betraying me. Instead, I'd caught her sacrificing everything to save me from a pain she didn't think I could handle. And she was right. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle that my father had died trying to expose the Whitmore family. I couldn't handle that Sophia had known or suspected and had been trying to make it right. I couldn't handle that while I'd been watching her cry and break and fight. I'd been too busy suspecting her of infidelity to see the real battle she was waging. I sat in that basement, surrounded by my father's things and my own stupidity, and realized I'd become exactly the kind of man my father would have been ashamed of. Not because I'd suspected my wife, but because when she needed me most, I'd been too caught up in my own insecurity to see the truth. I didn't tell her I knew. Not that night, not the next day, not the following week, because what could I say? Hey, honey, I've been spying on you for a month and you just discovered that your family killed my father and you've been secretly seeking justice. There was no version of that conversation that ended well. So I did what I'd been doing for months. I pretended, smiled when she smiled, made dinner when she worked late, kissed her goodbye in the mornings like I didn't know she was carrying a secret that was destroying her from the inside out. But now watching the camera feeds had a different tenor. Before I'd watched for evidence of betrayal. Now I watched because I couldn't look away from her pain. I saw her cry in the shower after phone calls with her father, calls where I could see her spine stiffen with anger, even through the bathroom door. I saw her spend hours reviewing financial documents, her face pale with horror at whatever she was finding. I saw her meet with more lawyers, more investigators, more people who were helping her build a case against her own blood. I saw Marcus become her lifeline, the one person who knew the full truth, who could shoulder some of the weight. Their relationship wasn't romantic, it was the bond of co-conspirators, of people fighting a war together, and he was her ally in a battle against her family's legacy. And I hated that it wasn't me, that I couldn't be that for her because she'd decided I was too fragile to handle the truth. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was. Because the more I learned, the more I realized how deep this went. I started doing my own research. Late at night, after Sophia fell into her restless sleep, I'd dig into the Whitmore family history. The public record showed a real estate development empire built over 3 generations. Prestigious projects, luxury properties, connections to politicians and business leaders, philanthropy and charity galas, and all the markers of old money success. But if you looked closer, if you knew what to look for, you could see the cracks. Labor disputes that settled quickly and quietly, contractors who'd worked for the Whitmores and then suddenly disappeared from the industry, code violations that never seemed to stick, OSHA investigations that went nowhere. And woven through it all, a pattern of wage theft so systematic it could only be intentional. The Whitmores had built their fortune, in part, by underpaying the men who built their properties. They'd classify workers as contractors to avoid payroll taxes and benefits. They'd change contract terms mid-project. They'd find reasons to withhold final payments. And when workers complained, they'd bury them in legal fees they couldn't afford. My father had been one of dozens, maybe hundreds. He'd figured it out. Had started collecting evidence, talking to other contractors, building a case. And the stress of fighting the Whitmore family, knowing he was right but lacking the resources to prove it, had literally killed him. And Sophia, who I'd met 3 years after his death, who'd heard my stories about my working-class hero father without ever revealing her family's role in his demise, had eventually connected the dots. I found an email thread. She'd left her laptop open one night, between her and Marcus from 8 months ago. The subject line, "We have a problem." Marcus, I was going through Dad's old files for the Riverside project and found something. Attached is a contract with Richard Cross from 2015. Look at the payment terms. Now look at the actual payment record. There's a $47,000 discrepancy. I checked Cross's other invoices. They're all like this. Systematically underpaid. This isn't an accounting error. This is fraud. Marcus's response. How many other contractors have similar discrepancies, Sophia? I've been going through the archives all night. I've found at least 30 so far. All underpaid. All threatened when they complained. Marcus, I married Richard Cross's son, Daniel's father, the man Daniel idolizes. And my family is the reason he's dead, Marcus. We need to talk about this in person, not over email. This is, Sophia, catastrophic, I know, but I can't unknow it, and I can't let it stand. We have to make this right. That was 8 months ago. She'd known for 8 months, had been fighting this fight for 8 months. While I'd been suspecting her of infidelity, she'd been quietly dismantling her family's empire to give me justice I didn't even know I needed. I closed the laptop, went to the bathroom, and vomited. The confrontation I'd been dreading came from an unexpected direction. Sophia's brother, James Whitmore III, showed up at our apartment on a Saturday morning in early December. I was making breakfast. Sophia was in the shower when the doorbell rang. I'd met James a handful of times. He was everything Sophia wasn't, entitled, dismissive, the kind of man who'd never worked for anything in his life, but believed he'd earned everything he had. He ran the family's finance division and treated me like I was the help. "Daniel," he said when I opened the door, not bothering with a greeting. "Is my sister home?" "In the shower. You want to come in?" He brushed past me without answering, his expensive cologne filling our foyer. "I need to talk to her, now." Like I said, she's... Get her. The command in his voice made something primal in me bristle. "Excuse me? This can't wait. Get her now." Before I could respond, Sophia appeared in the hallway, wrapped in a robe, her wet hair dripping on the hardwood. "James, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Alone." He shot me a look that made his meaning clear. Sophia's jaw tightened. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Daniel. I really don't think, say it or leave. James's face went red. Fine, Dad knows what you're doing. The lawyers you hired, they contacted his office. He knows you're trying to build a case against the company, against the family. Are you out of your fucking mind? My entire body went rigid. This was it. The moment where my secret knowledge would collide with reality. Sophia didn't flinch. Dad defrauded contractors for years, stole from working people, killed, her voice broke. His practices killed good men. I'm not going to let that stand. Those were business decisions, legal business decisions. If some contractors couldn't handle the terms, he changed the terms after the work was done. He withheld payment. He threatened them with legal action they couldn't afford. That's not business. James, that's theft. It's how the world works. Dad built this empire by being smarter than the competition. If you can't, my father-in-law is dead because of what Dad did. The words dropped like bombs into the room. Daniel's father, Richard Cross, one of the dozens of contractors Dad systematically defrauded, the man Daniel loved more than anyone. And our family killed him. James looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Then he turned to me, seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. You're Richard Cross's son, he said, and it wasn't a question. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there while my wife's brother put together a puzzle I'd been living inside for months. Holy shit, James breathed. Does he know? Did you tell him what happened? Not yet, Sophia said quietly. I wanted to have something concrete before what? Before you destroyed our family's reputation on some misguided guilt trip? Before you cost us millions in restitution? Before you burned down everything 3 generations of Whitmores built? Because you married some... He didn't get to finish the sentence, because Sophia moved faster than I'd ever seen her move, got in his face with a fury that made him step back. Choose your next words carefully, and she said, her voice deadly calm. Because if you finish that thought, or brother or not, I will remove you from this apartment and this company and my life so fast you'll get whiplash. Sophia, you can't seriously... I can, and I will. What Dad did was wrong. What you're defending is wrong, and I'm going to make it right. Even if it costs me everything. It'll cost you more than everything. Dad's already talked to the lawyers. If you move forward with this, he's cutting you off completely. No trust fund, no company position, no inheritance. You'll be disowned. Sophia smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Good. I never wanted the blood money anyway. James looked between us, his sister who'd just chosen justice over wealth, and me, the man whose father she was avenging, and shook his head. You're making a mistake. No, Sophia said. I'm correcting one. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. In the silence that followed, Sophia and I stared at each other across the ruins of all our secrets. How long have you known? She asked finally. That your family killed my father? About 2 weeks. No, how long have you known that I knew? The question hung between us like a blade. I couldn't lie anymore, couldn't keep pretending. I installed a camera. About 6 weeks ago. I thought you were having an affair with Marcus. I watched you for weeks. I spied on you in our home because I was so convinced you were betraying me that I couldn't see you were actually trying to save me. I expected anger, expected her to throw me out, expected her to confirm every fear I'd had about not deserving her. Instead, she laughed. A broken, exhausted sound. Of course you did. God, we're a disaster, aren't we? Sophia, no, I mean it. I've been lying to you for months because I was too scared to trust you with the truth. And you've been spying on me for weeks because you were too scared to confront me about your suspicions. We're both so terrified of losing each other that we've been destroying each other instead. She was right. We were a disaster. 2 people who loved each other desperately, kept apart by fear and secrets and good intentions gone wrong. Tell me, I said. Tell me everything. No more secrets, no more protecting me. I need to know. So she did. We sat on the couch, the same couch where I'd watched her cry dozens of times through a hidden camera. And Sophia told me the story I should have heard months ago. I was going through the archives for the Riverside project, she began, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. Looking for zoning permits from 2015, and I found your father's contract. I recognized the name because you'd talked about him so much. Richard Cross, your hero, the man who taught you about integrity and hard work. She paused, gathering herself. The contract showed he was supposed to be paid $87,000 for the pool house renovation, but the payment record showed only $40,000. I thought it was an error, so I started digging, found more contracts, more discrepancies, dozens of them, all contractors, all underpaid by 30 to 50%. And then I found the emails. Her voice went flat, the tone she used when she had to deliver devastating news. Internal memos from my father and James discussing how to maximize profit on labor, how to structure contracts so they could change terms mid-project, how to intimidate contractors who complained. There was one email. She stopped, quiet, closed her eyes. One email where James joked about how some working-class hero was threatening to sue, but they'd bury him in legal fees before he ever saw a courtroom. That was my father, wasn't it? I said. Not a question. I think so. The timeline matches. And there were phone records, calls between your dad and our company's lawyers in the weeks before he died. He was trying to fight it, trying to get what he was owed, trying to hold them accountable. The stress killed him. I think it contributed. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so fucking sorry. My family, my blood took advantage of your father's labor and then broke him when he tried to fight back. I should have been angry, should have been furious, should have seen her as the enemy, the daughter of the man who destroyed my father. Instead, I saw her clearly for the first time in months. This woman who'd discovered her family's crimes and immediately decided to burn it all down to make things right. Who'd been fighting alone because she loved me too much to burden me with a pain she thought would break me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. When you first found out? Because I didn't have proof yet. Just contracts and payment records that could be explained away as accounting errors. I needed more. Needed to find the other victims, get their testimonies, build an actual case. And I knew that if I told you without being able to promise you justice, it would destroy you. You'd have to live with the knowledge that my family killed your father, and there was nothing you could do about it. So you decided to do something about it. I hired investigators, contacted other contractors who'd worked for us, found labor lawyers who specialized in wage theft, and I brought Marcus in because I needed someone who understood the financial side, who could help me trace the money, who could keep me sane while I essentially committed career suicide. Your family thinks you're having an affair, I realized suddenly. That's why James wasn't surprised to see me. He thinks you're leaving me for Marcus. Let them think that. It's easier than the truth, that I'm betraying everything my family stands for, because I married a man whose father they destroyed. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the full weight of what she'd been carrying. I didn't mean for you to suspect me of cheating. I tried to keep things normal at home, tried to keep you separate from all of this. But I was drowning, Daniel. Drowning in the enormity of what I'd discovered, in the guilt of knowing I'd benefited my whole life from money stolen from people like your father. And I couldn't share that burden with you without telling you the whole truth. So you suffered alone. So I suffered alone, she confirmed, and apparently not very well, since you suspected me enough to install a camera. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. I should have trusted you, should have just asked instead of assuming the worst. I gave you reasons to assume the worst. Late nights, secret meetings, lying about where I was and who I was with. If I'd been you, I would have thought I was cheating too. We sat in silence. Two people who'd been fighting separate battles, finally in the same war. What happens now? I asked. Sophia took a breath. Now we finish this. We have enough evidence to file a class action lawsuit against Whitmore Development. 43 contractors who were systematically defrauded over 15 years. If we win, it'll cost my family tens of millions in restitution. They'll be professionally ruined. The Whitmore name, 3 generations of prestige and power, will be synonymous with corruption and theft. And you? I'll be cut off, disowned. James made that clear. My trust fund, my position in the company, my inheritance, all gone. We'll have this apartment until my father's lawyers figure out a way to take it. After that, she shrugged, I'll figure something out. I'm smart. I'm capable. I don't need my family's money to survive. But she was scared. I could see it in the way her hands trembled around the coffee mug. This woman who'd grown up with every advantage, who'd never known financial insecurity, was about to lose everything. For me, for my father, for justice. What do you need, how can I help? She looked at me like I'd offered her oxygen after months of drowning. You want to help? Even after everything my family did? Your family's sins aren't yours, Sophia. You didn't kill my father. You're trying to save his memory. How could I not help with that? For the first time in months, she really smiled. We have a meeting with the lead attorney next week to finalize the lawsuit, and then we contact the contractors, the families, and tell them we're moving forward, that the statute of limitations expires in 4 months, so we need to file soon. I'll be there, I said, every step of the way. No more secrets, no more fighting this alone. She leaned against me, and I wrapped my arms around her. And for the first time since I'd installed that goddamn camera, I felt like we were actually together instead of just occupying the same space. I love you, she whispered. I know I haven't shown it well lately, but I do. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, I said, and I should have trusted that. Should have trusted you. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the wreckage of our secrets, beginning the slow work of rebuilding something stronger. The next 4 months were brutal. Sophia's father, Robert Whitmore III, was everything you'd expect from a man who'd built an empire on the backs of workers he considered beneath him. Ruthless, connected, willing to burn the world down rather than admit fault. The moment we filed the lawsuit, 43 contractors represented, seeking $28 million on unpaid wages and damages, he declared war. He hired the most vicious defense attorneys money could buy, lawyers who specialized in crushing class action suits, who'd make the victims testify to every humiliating detail of their financial struggles, who'd paint them as greedy opportunists trying to cash in on legitimate business disputes. He launched a PR campaign, painted Sophia as a disturbed young woman, mentally unstable, manipulated by her working-class husband into attacking the family that had given her everything. Suggested that I was a gold digger who'd married her for money and was now trying to extract more through litigation. He froze Sophia's trust fund, kicked her off the company board, and began eviction proceedings on our apartment, which he technically owned through a family holding company. And he called her every day, sometimes multiple times, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to threatening to coldly pragmatic. I listened to one once. Sophia had left her phone on the counter, and I heard her father's voice echo through our kitchen. Sophia, sweetheart, it's Dad. I know you think you're doing the right thing here, but you're destroying our family. Everything I built, everything your grandfather and great-grandfather built, you're tearing it down over a misunderstanding. These contractors knew what they were signing. They agreed to the terms. If they couldn't manage their finances, that's not our problem. Please, baby, drop this lawsuit. Come back to the company. We can fix this privately. Make some settlements, move on. But if you continue down this path, I'll have no choice but to protect the family's interests. And that means cutting you off completely. No money, no position, no inheritance. You'll be starting over from nothing. Is that really what you want? Call me back. I love you. The I love you at the end was the worst part. The casual cruelty wrapped in parental affection. Sophia never called him back. Instead, she did what she'd been doing for months. She fought. We fought together. I took a leave of absence from teaching, unpaid, because we couldn't afford for me not to be involved. We spent our days in lawyers' offices, going through evidence, preparing testimony, reaching out to the contractors and their families. Some of them were easy to find. Others had disappeared, moved states, changed careers, and given up on ever seeing justice. A few had died, like my father, leaving behind widows and children who deserved to know the truth. I called these families, introduced myself as Richard Cross's son, told them what Sophia had discovered, invited them to join the lawsuit. Most said yes immediately. A few were skeptical. Why would a Whitmore help them? This had to be a trap. I didn't blame them. The Whitmores had given them every reason not to trust. But slowly, painfully, we built our case. 43 contractors became 50. 50 became 67. Each one with documentation, contracts, emails, payment records, photos of work completed. Each one with a story of being systematically cheated by a company that believed it was above accountability. Marcus was indispensable. He knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. Knew which servers held archived emails, knew which executives had been involved in the fraud, knew how to trace money through shell companies and holding corporations. He was also facing his own consequences. Robert Whitmore fired him, of course, blackballed him in the industry, made it clear that anyone who hired Marcus Chen would never do business with Whitmore Development again. Marcus didn't care. "I've got skills," he told us over Chinese takeout in our increasingly empty apartment. We'd been selling furniture to cover legal costs. "I'll land on my feet, but these contractors, they never got that chance. We owe them this." The three of us became a unit, partners in what felt increasingly like a suicide mission. Because even as our case grew stronger, Robert Whitmore's retaliation grew more severe, and he got my teaching license suspended pending a review, filed a complaint claiming I was using my position to recruit students' parents for a frivolous lawsuit. It wasn't true, but the investigation meant I couldn't work. He had Sophia's car repossessed. It was technically a company vehicle, so legally he was in the right. But morally, it was a father punishing his daughter for having a conscience. He leaked stories to the press. Whitmore heiress's bizarre crusade against family. Real estate scion marries contractor's son, then sues own father. Is this a case of justice or revenge? The narrative he crafted was insidious, that Sophia was mentally unstable, that I'd manipulated her, that this lawsuit was really about me extracting money from the family that had raised me above my station. It was classist, it was cruel, it was effective. Public opinion, at least among people who mattered in Robert Whitmore's circles, turned against us. We were ostracized from social events. Friends stopped calling. Even some of the contractors who'd initially joined the lawsuit dropped out, intimidated by the Whitmore legal machine. But others stood firm. Families who'd been bankrupted by the Whitmores' fraud. Widows whose husbands had died under the weight of financial stress. Sons and daughters who'd watched their parents get crushed by a system rigged against them. They stood with us because Sophia, a Whitmore, was willing to stand with them. And that, more than anything, kept us going. The depositions were where the ugliness really came out. Sophia had to testify first. Had to sit across from her father's lawyers, people she'd known since childhood, who'd been guests at her wedding, and answer questions designed to destroy her credibility. I sat in the room, watching, unable to intervene as they dissected her life. "Ms. Whitmore, isn't it true that you've been diagnosed with depression?" "Yes, but... And you're on medication for this condition?" "Yes, but that doesn't... Isn't it possible that your mental health struggles have affected your judgment? That you've misinterpreted normal business practices as something sinister?" Our lawyer objected. The questions continued. "You married Daniel Cross 3 years ago. Were you aware of his father's history with your family's company when you began the relationship?" "No, I didn't connect the names until..." "So you're saying it's just a coincidence that you married the son of a man who had a dispute with your family, and now you're leading a lawsuit against that same family?" "It's not a coincidence, it's fate or karma, or whatever you want to call the universe's sense of irony." The lawyer smiled like she'd won a point. "Ms. Whitmore, isn't it true that you and your husband are facing significant financial difficulties? That you're being evicted from your apartment? That Mr. Cross has lost his teaching position? Because of retaliation from my father? Or because you've made choices that have consequences? Isn't it possible that this lawsuit is really about securing a financial settlement? That you're using these contractors as pawns in a family dispute?" Sophia leaned forward, and I saw the steel in her that had made her willing to blow up her entire life. "The only people using contractors as pawns are sitting on your side of this table. My father stole from working people for years, systematically, deliberately. And when they tried to fight back, he crushed them. I'm not using anyone. I'm trying to make things right. By destroying your family's reputation? By telling the truth. If that destroys the reputation, maybe the reputation was built on lies." They went after her for 6 hours. By the end, she was pale and shaking, but she hadn't broken. I was next. They painted me as a gold digger, a manipulator, a working-class resentment case who'd married up and then decided to burn down the family that had elevated me. "Mr. Cross, you've benefited significantly from your marriage to Ms. Whitmore, haven't you? Living in a multi-million-dollar apartment, driving expensive cars, and traveling internationally, all funded by Whitmore money." "Yes. And now that you've discovered your father had a dispute with the Whitmores, You've convinced your wife to sue her own family. Doesn't that strike you as convenient? My father didn't have a dispute. He was defrauded, cheated out of money he'd earned through hard labor. And the stress of fighting your clients killed him. Your father died of a heart attack. Natural causes. Are you really suggesting? I'm saying that my father was a healthy man who started having stress-induced health problems right around the time he discovered the Whitmores had stolen from him. I'm saying he spent the last months of his life fighting a battle he couldn't afford to fight, against people with unlimited resources. And I'm saying that burden killed him. That's quite a narrative. Do you have any proof of this causal connection? Do you have any proof it didn't happen that way? Our lawyer kicked me under the table. I was getting too emotional, too combative, but I couldn't help it. These people were defending the indefensible and doing it with smiles and expensive suits and the certainty that money would prevail over morality. Then they brought out the camera. Mr. Cross, isn't it true that you installed a surveillance device in your home to spy on your wife? My stomach dropped. Yes, but a hidden camera, without her knowledge or consent. I thought she was having an affair. I was wrong. So you violated your wife's privacy based on unfounded suspicions, and then, having gathered evidence of her activities through illegal surveillance, it wasn't illegal. It was my home too. You decided to use that information to manipulate her into this lawsuit. That's not what happened. Then explain to me, Mr. Cross, how you discovered that Ms. Whitmore was investigating her family's business practices. I looked at Sophia. She nodded slightly. We'd known this was coming. I watched the camera footage. I saw her crying, saw her meeting with lawyers, saw her fighting this battle alone. And when I finally understood what she was doing, I stopped spying and started helping. How convenient. How noble. The lawyer's sarcasm was thick enough to choke on. Mr. Cross, isn't it true that you're angry at the Whitmore family, that you blame them for your father's death, and that this lawsuit is really about revenge? Yes, I said, and the honesty of it seemed to surprise everyone in the room. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I blame them. Yes, this is partially about revenge, but it's also about justice. It's about making sure no other contractor gets cheated. No other family loses a father to the stress of fighting a rigged system. If wanting those things makes me vengeful, then I'm vengeful. But I'm also right. The lawyer smiled. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Cross. No further questions. We left the deposition knowing we'd been damaged. The narrative of the manipulative husband and the unstable wife had been reinforced. The hidden camera, my violation of Sophia's privacy, would be used to paint us as unreliable, untrustworthy, possibly even calculating. We're fucked, Marcus said that night in the studio apartment we'd moved into after losing the brownstone. They're going to use the camera to destroy your credibility and make it look like you manipulated Sophia into this whole thing. Then we need something they can't spin, Sophia said quietly. Something so damning that no amount of character assassination matters. Like what? I asked. She looked at both of us, and I saw the moment she made a decision. Like my father's private files, the ones he keeps at the estate, the ones that show exactly how systematic the fraud was. Sophia, Marcus said carefully, those files are in your family's home. Getting them would be breaking and entering, she finished. I know, but I still have my key. And I know the security codes, and my father's in London until next week. It's not breaking and entering if I have permission to be there. You don't have permission, I pointed out. He never explicitly revoked it. Technically. We looked at each other. Three people who'd already lost so much, contemplating risking even more. Fuck it, Marcus said. I'm in. So was I. We drove to Connecticut on a Tuesday night in a borrowed car because all of ours had been repossessed, with a plan that was more desperation than strategy. The Whitmore estate sat on 40 acres in Greenwich, behind gates and walls and the kind of old money security that assumed you couldn't be dangerous. Sophia's code still worked. The gates swung open like they were welcoming her home. I grew up here, she said as we drove up the long driveway. Had my 18th birthday in that garden. Learned to ride horses in those stables. Thought this place represented everything good about my family, legacy, tradition, success. And now, Marcus asked from the back seat, now it looks like what it is, a monument built with stolen money. The house was dark. We parked around back near the kitchen entrance, less visible from the road. Sophia used her key, no alarm. Her father still believed he was untouchable. His study was on the second floor. A massive room lined with mahogany bookshelves, leather furniture, windows that overlooked the grounds. The kind of room that said powerful man in every detail. Sophia went straight to the filing cabinets behind his desk. Locked, but she knew where he kept the keys, hidden in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. Even privileged men are predictable. We started pulling files, contracts, financial records, emails that had been printed and filed away before he'd learned to be more digital. Evidence of fraud spanning 2 decades, not just the contractors in our lawsuit, but dozens more. Jesus, Marcus breathed, photographing documents as fast as he could. This isn't just wage theft. This is racketeering, tax fraud, money laundering through shell companies. Your father built a criminal enterprise and called it real estate development. Take everything, Sophia said. Every piece of paper that shows what he did. I want this airtight. We worked for 2 hours, filling bags with documents, photographing everything we couldn't carry. It was systematic, it was thorough. It was also illegal as hell. Even with Sophia's access, taking these files without permission could be construed as theft. We were almost done when we heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel, car headlights sweeping across the windows. Shit, I said. I thought he was in London. He was supposed to be, Sophia said, her face pale. Back door, Marcus said. Now. We grabbed what we could, leaving the study in disarray, no time to cover our tracks, and ran for the kitchen. But we could already hear the front door opening. Voices. Her father wasn't alone. The wine cellar, Sophia whispered. There's a door to the outside from there. We can... Sophia? Her father's voice echoed through the house. Sophia, I know you're here. The security system sent an alert. We froze in the hallway, bags of evidence in hand, caught. Sophia straightened her spine. Keep going, she told Marcus and me. Get to the car. I'll handle this. We're not leaving you, I said. You have to. If he calls the cops, we all get arrested. But if it's just me, I can claim I came to get my personal belongings. He won't press charges against his own daughter, not publicly. The scandal would hurt him as much as us. Sophia, go, please. I need you both to get that evidence to the lawyers. That matters more than whatever happens to me here. Marcus grabbed my arm. She's right, come on. We slipped down to the wine cellar, through the delivery entrance, out into the night. From inside, I could hear raised voices. Sophia and her father, years of tension finally erupting. We made it to the car, drove away with bags full of stolen evidence, left Sophia to face her father's wrath alone. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Sophia didn't come home that night, or the next morning. By noon, I was losing my mind, imagining every worst-case scenario. Then she walked through the door of our shitty studio apartment, looking exhausted but unbroken. What happened? I asked, pulling her into my arms. He tried to make a deal. Said if I dropped the lawsuit, he'd quietly settle with the contractors. Not for the full amount, maybe 40 cents on the dollar, but enough that they'd get something. And he'd reinstate me, give me back my position, my money, my life. What did you say? I told him 40 cents on the dollar was another insult, that these families deserved full restitution plus damages, that I didn't want his blood money or his corrupt empire. She pulled back to look at me. And I told him I knew about everything, all of it. Not just the contractors, the tax fraud, the money laundering, the bribes to city officials, everything we found in his files. How did he react? He threatened me, said if I exposed any of that, he'd make sure I never worked again, that I'd be investigated for theft, for breaking and entering, for corporate espionage, that he'd destroy you, destroy Marcus, destroy anyone who helped me. Sophia, so I told him I didn't care, that I'd rather be destroyed telling the truth than preserved in his lies, that I was done being a Whitmore, if being a Whitmore meant being complicit in destroying people's lives. She was shaking, but she was also smiling, like she'd finally shed a weight she'd been carrying her entire life. What do we do now? I asked. Now, Marcus said, emerging from the corner where he'd been uploading documents to our lawyer's secure server. We have everything we need: contract fraud, wage theft, RICO violations, tax evasion, environmental violations I found in the files from the Riverside project. Your father's company is going down, Sophia, not just in civil court, criminally. Good, she said. He deserves it. We spent the next week preparing. Our lawyers went through the evidence with the kind of glee that only attorneys who specialize in white-collar crime can muster. What we'd found was better than they'd hoped. Systematic, documented, undeniable. They filed an amended complaint, added RICO charges, referred the tax fraud to the IRS and the money laundering to the FBI, brought the environmental violations to the Robert Whitmore's empire started crumbling. First, his biggest investors pulled out. Nobody wanted to be associated with a company under federal investigation. Then his bank froze his credit lines pending the fraud investigation. Then the contractors who dropped out of our lawsuit rejoined, along with dozens more who saw that we might actually win. The class action became massive. Over 100 contractors and their families, seeking $60 million in restitution. The press, which had initially painted us as unstable troublemakers, started digging into the story. Reporters found more victims, more examples of Whitmore Development's predatory practices, more evidence that Robert Whitmore had built his fortune by exploiting the very workers he'd needed to build it. Public opinion shifted. We went from pariahs to heroes, or at least to underdogs fighting a righteous fight. But Robert Whitmore wasn't done. He called Sophia one last time. I was there when she answered. We'd agreed. No more secrets, no more handling things alone. Speakerphone, so I could hear his last attempt to control her. Sophia, baby, please, he said, and I could hear the desperation. This man who'd always been so controlled, so certain of his power, was watching everything slip away. We can still fix this. I'll settle. Full restitution. $60 million split among the contractors. I'll even pay damages, just please drop the criminal referrals. Don't let this destroy the family name. The family name destroyed itself, Dad. I did what I had to do to keep the company competitive, to preserve our legacy for you and James. Everything I did for this family. You did it for yourself. You're just trying to justify it now that you're caught. Sophia, please, I'm your father. I love you. Don't do this. She closed her eyes, and I saw the little girl in her. The one who'd wanted her father's approval, who'd believed in the goodness of her family name. That girl was saying goodbye. I love you too, Dad, but I love the truth more. And I love the people you hurt more, and I love myself too much to keep living in your shadow. She hung up. He tried calling back. She blocked his number. That was the moment she finally became free. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It was covered by every major news outlet, not just because of the money involved, but because it represented something bigger. A billionaire's daughter turning on her own family. A working-class husband fighting for his dead father's honor. David versus Goliath. If David had insider knowledge of exactly where Goliath's weak spots were. The courtroom was packed every day. Contractors and their families. Media. Robert Whitmore's society friends there to support him or maybe to watch him fall. It was hard to tell which. Sophia testified first, walked the jury through what she'd found, explained the fraud in clear, simple terms, showed them the contracts and the payment records, the emails and the threats, the systematic way her family had stolen from working people. The defense tried to break her, painted her as mentally unstable, manipulated by her husband, seeking revenge for imagined slights. But Sophia was unshakable. She had been preparing for this her entire life, even if she hadn't known it. All those years of board meetings and investor presentations, learning to hold her ground against powerful men who thought they knew better, it had trained her for this moment. Ms. Whitmore, the defense attorney said, you're asking this jury to believe that your father, a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, is actually a criminal. Don't you think that's an extraordinary claim? It's an evidence-based claim, Sophia replied calmly. The documents speak for themselves. My father defrauded contractors for years. Whether he's respected in his community doesn't change what he did. It just means he was good at hiding it. The contractors testified next. One by one, they told their stories. Lost homes, bankruptcies, marriages that couldn't survive the financial stress. Health problems caused by the anxiety of fighting a system rigged against them. My father couldn't testify, obviously, but I did it for him. I told the jury about the man who'd raised me, who'd taught me that hard work and integrity mattered, who'd believe the system would protect him if he just followed the rules and did right by people. He was wrong, I said, looking directly at the jury. The system didn't protect him. It crushed him, because he was fighting people with unlimited resources and no conscience. People who believed that money gave them the right to exploit anyone they deemed less important. I told them about finding his journals, about seeing his frustration and fear in those final months, about the note I'd found dated a week before he died. If I don't make it through this, I want Danny to know I fought for what was right, even when it cost me everything. By the time I finished testifying, half the jury was in tears. The defense brought their experts, accountants who claimed the payment discrepancies were clerical errors, business analysts who insisted Whitmore Development's practices were standard in the industry, character witnesses who swore Robert Whitmore was a good man who'd made mistakes, not a criminal who'd run a systematic fraud. But they couldn't explain away the evidence, couldn't make the documents say anything other than what they clearly said, couldn't gaslight a jury that had seen too much proof. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. They put Sophia's journey at the center. A woman who'd had everything, who'd discovered her privilege was built on theft, and who'd chosen justice over comfort. Ms. Whitmore didn't have to do any of this, the prosecutor said. She could have ignored what she found, could have stayed comfortable in her wealth, could have looked the other way, like so many people do when confronting uncomfortable truths about their own families. But she didn't. She chose the hard path, the path that cost her everything, because she understood something fundamental, that wealth built on the suffering of others isn't really wealth at all. It's just dressed up theft. The defense's closing tried to paint us as vindictive, as opportunistic, as a family drama that had gotten out of hand. But you could see in the jury's faces, they weren't buying it. After 3 weeks of testimony, it took them 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. $70 million in restitution and damages, to be split among the contractors and their families. Criminal referrals upheld. Robert Whitmore would face federal charges for tax fraud, money laundering, and RICO violations. When the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted. Contractors sobbing with relief. Sophia collapsing into my arms. Marcus pumping his fist like he'd just won the championship. And across the room, Robert Whitmore, sitting in stone-faced silence, his empire crumbling around him, his daughter having been the one to bring it down. The money took months to distribute. Legal settlements always do paperwork and processing and making sure everyone gets their fair share. My father's portion went to me. $987,000. What he'd been owed, plus damages, plus interest accrued over the years. It felt like blood money, like I was profiting from his death, but it was also justice, proof that he'd been right, that his fight had mattered. I used some of it to pay off my student loans, debts I'd been carrying since before Sophia, before the fairy tale that turned into a nightmare that turned into something better. Used more to help the other families, the ones who were struggling most. Set up a scholarship fund in my father's name for students pursuing construction trades. Kept enough to make sure Sophia and I could rebuild. Because Sophia had lost everything. Her trust fund, her company position, her family, both parents disowned her publicly, and James refused to take her calls. Her father was convicted on 3 counts of fraud and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Her mother blamed her for destroying the family, but Sophia wasn't destroyed. She was free. I spent my whole life trying to be worthy of the Whitmore name, she told me one night, lying in bed in our small apartment, so much smaller than the brownstone, but ours in a way that place never was. Trying to live up to this legacy of success and prestige, and I was miserable because the legacy was rotten. I was just too blinded by privilege to see it. You see it now, I said, I see everything now. See how the world really works. How it's rigged for people like me and against people like your father, and I can't unsee it. Don't want it to unsee it. She started a consulting firm, advising companies on ethical business practices, helping them audit their contractor relationships, making sure they weren't repeating her family's mistakes. Marcus partnered with her. Turns out, having insider knowledge of corporate fraud makes you really good at spotting it. The business grew slowly but steadily. They weren't making Whitmore money, but they were making enough. More importantly, they were making a difference. I went back to teaching, and my license was reinstated after the verdict. The review board concluded that the suspension had been retaliatory. My students threw me a welcome back party. complete with a banner that said, Mr. Cross, the real American hero. I cried in front of 30 teenagers and didn't even care. Marcus started dating someone, a paralegal he'd met during the trial. She was funny and smart and didn't care that he'd been blackballed by half of corporate America. You're famous, she told him. You're the guy who helped take down a billionaire. That's way sexier than whatever boring job you had before. He introduced us over dinner, and I watched him light up around her and felt grateful that something good had come from all the devastation. Sophia and I started therapy, together and separately. Working through the trauma of what we'd been through, the secrets, the surveillance, the betrayal of her family, the loss of my father, the trial, our therapist told us we had a choice. We could let this break us, or we could let it forge us into something stronger. We chose stronger. We renewed our vows a year after the verdict. Small ceremony, just friends and some of the contractor families. No Whitmores. They weren't invited and they wouldn't have come anyway. But my father was there. In spirit, at least. I felt him as I promised to love Sophia in truth and trust, with no more secrets, no more cameras, no more assuming the worst. Your father would be proud of you, Sophia whispered, when we kissed. Of both of us. We finished his fight. No, I said. Finished our fight. He started it. But we made sure it meant something. If you've ever installed a camera to catch someone you love in a lie, I understand the impulse, and I understand the desperate need to know. The way uncertainty can eat you alive, making you willing to violate trust and privacy just to confirm or deny your worst fears. But here's what I learned. Surveillance might give you information, but it doesn't give you truth. Not the real truth. I watched Sophia for weeks, saw her cry, saw her meet with Marcus, saw her carry a weight I didn't understand. And I interpreted it all through the lens of my own insecurity, saw betrayal where there was actually sacrifice, saw deception where there was actually protection. The camera couldn't tell me she loved me, couldn't tell me she was fighting for me, couldn't tell me that her secrets weren't about excluding me, but about shielding me from a pain she thought would break me. I only learned those things when I stopped watching and started asking. When I chose trust over surveillance. When I let her tell her story instead of assuming I knew it. And yes, her story shattered me. Learning that my father had been killed by the stress of fighting her family, that was devastating. But it was also necessary. It was the truth I needed to move forward. The camera gave me fragments. Conversation with her gave me context. Here's the other thing I learned. Betrayal isn't always what it looks like. Sophia had betrayed me in a way. She'd lied about where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, but she'd done it to protect me while she tried to fix a catastrophic wrong. That's not the same as cheating. It's not the same as choosing someone else over me. It's choosing to carry a burden alone so I wouldn't have to. Was it the right choice? Maybe not. Maybe she should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning. Maybe I would have been stronger than she thought. But I understand why she did it. And I understand that sometimes the people who love us make decisions we disagree with because they're trying to spare us pain. The hard part is trusting that their intentions are good even when their actions hurt us. If I could go back, I wouldn't install the camera. I would have that hard conversation earlier, the one where I said, I feel like I'm losing you, and I need to understand why. Would she have told me the truth then? I don't know. Maybe she would have lied anyway. Bought herself more time to build her case. But at least I would have given her the chance to trust me. At least I wouldn't have spent weeks violating her privacy, collecting evidence of a crime that wasn't happening. The camera made me a voyeur in my own life, made me a detective instead of a partner. And that cost us months of connection we can never get back. So if you're reading this, if you're in that place where you're considering surveillance because you can't trust the person you love, here's my advice. Have the conversation. The hard, scary, vulnerable conversation where you say, I'm afraid you're leaving me, or I feel like you're hiding something, or I need you to tell me the truth even if it hurts. And if they lie, if they gaslight you, if they refuse to give you honesty even when you're asking for it, then you have your answer. Not from a camera, but from their willingness to deceive you when directly confronted. But if they tell you the truth, even a partial truth, even a difficult truth, then you have a chance to work through it together, to be partners instead of adversaries. Sophia and I rebuilt our marriage from the ruins of our secrets. But it was hard, harder than it needed to be because we both chose protection over honesty, assumed fragility instead of resilience, let fear guide us instead of love. Don't make our mistakes. Don't spy when you can ask. Don't assume when you can verify. Don't protect when you can trust. Because the truth is this: if your relationship can't survive honesty, it was already broken. The camera won't fix it. Surveillance won't save it. Only truth, painful as it is, can give you a foundation to rebuild on. And sometimes, like in our case, the truth is so much stranger and more devastating than anything you imagined. Sometimes the betrayal isn't what you thought. Sometimes the person you're watching is actually a hero fighting a battle you didn't know existed. You can't see that through a camera lens. You can only see it when you put down the device, look your partner in the eye, and say, "Tell me everything. I'm strong enough to hear it." I wish I'd been strong enough to say that sooner. I wish I'd trusted Sophia and myself more than I trusted technology. But we got there eventually. And on the other side of all that pain and surveillance and revelation, we found something worth keeping. A marriage built on truth instead of assumption, on shared battles instead of separate silences, on the hard-earned knowledge that we're both stronger than we thought. My father died fighting for justice he never got to see. But Sophia and I finished that fight together, as partners. And that, more than any verdict, more than any settlement, more than anything a camera could have shown me, that's what matters. That's the real resolution. Not revenge, not vindication, just truth finally spoken, finally heard, finally turning pain into something that looks like redemption. If you've ever doubted the person you love, I get it. Doubt is human, but surveillance isn't the answer. Truth is hard, painful, devastating truth. The kind that sets you free, even as it breaks your heart. Sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't infidelity, and sometimes it's carrying a burden alone because you're too afraid your partner can't handle the truth. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to prove them wrong. To show that love isn't about protection, but about standing together even when everything is falling apart. This is a story about surveillance, but more than that, it's a story about trust, how we lose it, how we betray it, and how if we're willing to do the hard work, we might just earn it back. To everyone fighting battles their partners don't know about, tell them, trust them, give them the chance to be strong for you. And to everyone installing cameras, put them down, have the conversation. The truth you find might shatter you, but at least you'll find it together. Justice doesn't heal every wound, but truth gives you a place to start.